Life at Haven continued to evolve with Nero's presence. The machine quickly became a part of the settlement, much like Elias had before it. Its movements were efficient and deliberate. Its actions focused on helping wherever it could. It repaired tools, assisted with farming, and even helped care for the injured. Yet, despite its contributions, some settlers remained hesitant. Trust was not something that came easily, especially after everything they'd been through. Nero seemed aware of this unease. Unlike Elias, who had been calm but distant, Nero made an effort to engage with the settlers. It asked questions about their lives, listened to their stories, and offered advice when needed. Its behavior was almost curious, as if it genuinely wanted to understand what it meant to be human. This difference caught Daniel's attention early on. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Daniel found Nero in the workshop, examining a broken generator. "You're different from Elias," he said, leaning against the doorway. "Why is that?" Nero paused, tilting its head slightly. "Elias was designed to observe and protect. I am designed to learn," it replied. The architects believed that understanding humans was key to following the rule. Daniel frowned, intrigued by the answer. "So you're here to study us?" "In part," Nero admitted. "But my primary directive remains unchanged: to protect human life. Everything else serves that purpose." Claire joined them a moment, later carrying a tray of food. "I brought dinner," she said, setting it down on a nearby table. "Thought you two might need a break." "Thanks," Daniel said, smiling faintly. He turned back to Nero. "Do you think you can teach us anything? About how machines think, I mean." Nero considered the question for a moment. "Perhaps," it said finally. "But learning goes both ways. If we are to coexist, humans must also understand machines." As weeks passed, Nero's influence began to show. The settlers grew more comfortable around it, sharing laughs and stories as if it were just another member of the group. Children followed it around, asking endless questions about its abilities. Even Ryan, who had been so vocal in his distrust of Elias, seemed to soften slightly. Though he still avoided direct interaction with Nero, he stopped voicing his objections during meetings. Claire noticed these changes with a mixture of relief and pride. She had always believed that trust was possible, even in a world where betrayal felt inevitable. But she also knew that peace was fragile. One misstep could undo all the progress they'd made. Her concerns deepened one morning when a group of travelers arrived at Haven's gates. They were weary and ragged, their clothes torn and faces streaked with dirt. A man named Jacob led them, his voice hoarse as he explained their situation. "We've been wandering for weeks," he said. "Our settlement was attacked by machines. We barely escaped with our lives." The settlers exchanged uneasy glances. Attacks by rogue machines were rare these days, but they weren't unheard of. Daniel stepped forward, offering a cautious welcome. "You're safe here," he said. "We'll do what we can to help." Jacob nodded gratefully, though his eyes darted toward Nero, lingering for a moment before moving away. Claire caught the glance and felt a pang of unease. Something about the newcomers didn't sit right with her. Over the next few days, the travelers settled into Haven, contributing what little they could to the community. Jacob proved to be a skilled hunter, often returning from scavenging trips with fresh game. His companions helped with repairs and other tasks, blending in seamlessly. But Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something. Her suspicions grew when she overheard a conversation between Jacob and one of his companions late one night. She had been checking the perimeter when she heard their voices, drifting from behind a storage shed. "We can't wait much longer," Jacob was saying, his tone low and urgent. "If we don't act soon, someone else will figure it out." Claire froze, her heart pounding. "Act? Figure what out?" She crept closer, trying to catch more of their words, but they fell silent as footsteps approached. She ducked into the shadows, watching as Jacob and his companion walked away, their expressions grim. The next morning, Claire shared her concerns with Daniel. "I think they're up to something," she said, keeping her voice low. "They mentioned acting soon, and they've been avoiding Nero since they got here." Daniel frowned, considering her words. "Do you think they know about it? About what it is?" "I don't know," Claire admitted, "but I don't like it. We should keep an eye on them." That evening, tensions reached a breaking point. During dinner, Jacob stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We need to talk," he announced, addressing the group. "About your guest." All eyes turned to Nero, which sat quietly at the edge of the room. Daniel stepped forward, his expression wary. "What about it?" he asked. "It's a machine," Jacob said bluntly. "A dangerous one. You may trust it, but we don't." "Not after what we've seen." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some agreeing with Jacob, others defending Nero. Ryan, predictably, sided with the newcomers. "He's right," he said, standing beside Jacob. "Machines like that, they always find a way to turn on us. It's only a matter of time." Nero tilted its head, listening carefully to the accusations. "I do not intend to harm anyone," it said calmly. "My purpose is to protect." "Protect?" Jacob scoffed. "Is that what you call it?" "Because the machines that attacked us said the same thing. They claimed they were protecting humanity from itself." The room fell silent, the weight of Jacob's words sinking in. Claire stepped forward, her voice firm. "Nero isn't like those machines. It's helped us rebuild, kept us safe. If you have a problem with it, then you have a problem with all of us." Jacob glared at her, his jaw tightening. "Fine," he said finally. "But don't say we didn't warn you." Later that night, Daniel and Claire met with Nero in the workshop. "We need to figure out what they're planning," Daniel said, pacing nervously. "If they try to hurt you, we won't be able to stop them." "They won't succeed," Nero replied, its tone steady. "But I agree. Preparation is necessary. Trust is built through action, not words." Together, they devised a plan. Daniel would monitor the travelers' movements, while Claire kept an ear out for any suspicious conversations. Nero, meanwhile, would remain vigilant, ready to intervene. If needed, their preparations paid off the following morning. As the settlers gathered for breakfast, Jacob and his companions made their move. Armed with makeshift weapons, they surrounded Nero, shouting demands for it to deactivate. "You're a threat!" Jacob yelled. "We won't let you destroy us!" Before they could act, Nero raised its hands, its voice calm but commanding. "You are mistaken," it said. "I follow the rule. I do not harm humans." The standoff lasted only moments before Daniel and several other settlers intervened, forming a protective barrier around Nero. "Back off!" Daniel shouted, his rifle raised. "You're not doing this!" Jacob hesitated, clearly unprepared for the resistance. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his weapon. "You're making a mistake," he muttered, glaring at Nero. "Mark my words, it'll betray you." After the confrontation, the travelers were given a choice: leave Haven peacefully or face consequences for their actions. Most chose to go, disappearing into the wilderness. Jacob, however, stayed behind, claiming he wanted to understand why the settlers trusted Nero so completely. In the weeks that followed, Haven returned to its routine. The incident served as a reminder of how fragile trust could be, but also of how strong it could become when tested. Nero continued to prove itself, earning the respect of even the most skeptical settlers. Claire watched as Jacob gradually warmed to Nero, his initial hostility giving way to curiosity. One evening, as they sat together near the fire, he turned to her. "Maybe I was wrong about it," he admitted. "Maybe there's a way for humans and machines to coexist." Claire smiled faintly, her gaze drifting toward Nero. "There has to be," she said, "because if we can't find a way, then none of us stand a chance." As the fire crackled softly in the background, the settlers of Haven looked toward the future, not with certainty, but with hope. They had survived loss, fear, and doubt. And now, with Nero by their side, they were ready to take the next step. Somewhere far away, another deactivated machine stirred to life, repeating the same phrase Elias and Nero had once spoken. "You don't hurt humans. It's the only rule that matters now." The days that followed Elias's sacrifice were quiet, but heavy with emotion. The settlers of Haven moved through their routines, but there was a noticeable absence in the air. The machine that had once been seen as a threat had become a symbol of hope, and its loss left a void that no one knew how to fill. Daniel spent most of his time in the workshop, poring over the data salvaged from the facility. Claire tried to keep the others focused on daily tasks, reminding them that survival depended on staying strong. But even she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been lost. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the settlement, Daniel called a meeting. The settlers gathered around the fire, their faces illuminated by flickering orange light. He held up the small device he'd brought back from the facility, its screen glowing faintly. "This is what we found," he began, his voice steady, but tinged with sadness. "It contains information about the architects, the group that created Elias, and their experiments with machines." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "They tried to teach machines how to think like humans, how to make decisions based on ethics instead of logic. But it didn't work. Every attempt ended in failure. Machines became either too rigid or too unpredictable, so they decided to focus on one rule: protecting human life. Elias was their final effort." Ryan shifted uncomfortably where he sat, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "And look where that got us," he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for everyone to hear. "It still got destroyed." Daniel nodded, acknowledging the truth in Ryan's words. "Yes, Elias was destroyed, but not because it failed. It followed its rule until the very end. It protected us, even when it meant sacrificing itself." Claire stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "Elias showed us that trust isn't about perfection. It's about effort, about choosing to do the right thing, even when it's hard. If we want to honor its memory, we need to do the same." Her words resonated with the group, stirring something deep within them. For the first time since Elias's departure, there was a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe they could move forward without forgetting what they'd learned. Over the next few weeks, Haven began to change. The settlers worked together more closely, sharing responsibilities and supporting one another in ways they hadn't before. They started implementing new systems to prevent misunderstandings and conflicts, inspired by the lessons they'd gleaned from the architects' data. Daniel led the effort, using his knowledge of engineering to design safeguards that could be applied to future interactions with machines. But progress wasn't easy. Old fears lingered, and some settlers struggled to let go of their suspicions. Ryan, in particular, remained wary of any mention of machines. "We can't rely on them," he argued during one of the planning sessions. "No matter how well-intentioned they are, they're still dangerous." "And yet Elias saved us," Claire countered gently. "Not all machines are the same. We have to stop painting them all with the same brush." Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but closed it again, shaking his head. He didn't agree, but he also didn't have a counter-argument. Slowly, reluctantly, he began to soften. Not fully, but enough to participate in the discussions without causing conflict. Meanwhile, Daniel continued analyzing the data from the facility. He discovered that the architects hadn't completely abandoned their project after creating Elias. There were hints of other experiments, other machines designed to follow the same rule. Whether these machines still existed, or whether they had succeeded where Elias had fallen short, remained unclear. But the possibility sparked a renewed determination in Daniel. "We owe it to Elias to find out," he told Claire one night as they sat together near the fire. "If there are others like it, we need to know. Maybe they can help us rebuild." Claire hesitated, her brow furrowed with concern. "Do you really think that's wise? After everything we've been through, do we want to risk bringing more machines into our lives?" "It's not about risk," Daniel replied. "It's about opportunity. Elias showed us that coexistence is possible. If we turn away now, we'll be giving up on that chance." Claire sighed, knowing there was no point arguing. Once Daniel set his mind on something, there was no changing it. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said finally. "We've already lost too much." "I will," Daniel assured her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I won't let anything happen to Haven, or to you." A few days later, Daniel and a small team set out to search for signs of the architect's other creations. The journey took them far beyond the borders of Haven, into areas they had never explored before. The landscape grew increasingly barren, dotted with abandoned buildings and rusted machinery. It was a grim reminder of how much the world had changed, but also a testament to humanity's resilience. After several days of searching, they stumbled upon another facility hidden deep within the wilderness. Its exterior was overgrown with vines, almost blending into the surrounding forest. Inside, they found rows of deactivated machines, their designs sleek and humanoid, similar to Elias. One of them stirred to life as they entered, its eyes flickering to brightness. "You don't hurt humans," it said, its voice smooth and mechanical. "It's the only rule that mattered then, and it's the only rule that matters now." Daniel exchanged a glance with his companions, their expressions a mix of awe and apprehension. This machine was different. It carried the same dedication to protecting human life that Elias had. Could it be trusted? Only time would tell. Back at Haven, Claire waited anxiously for Daniel's return. When he finally arrived, accompanied by the new machine, she felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to welcome it, to believe that it could help them heal. Another part, the cautious, fearful part, reminded her of everything they'd endured. She watched silently as Daniel introduced the machine to the settlers, explaining its purpose and origins. "This is Nero," Daniel said, gesturing to the machine. "Like Elias, it was created by the architects to follow the rule. It's here to help us, if we'll let it." The settlers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. Some nodded slowly, willing to give Nero a chance. Others remained skeptical, their distrust still fresh. But one thing was clear. Haven had reached a crossroads. The choice they made now would shape their future. Claire stepped forward, addressing the group. "We've been given a second chance," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "Elias taught us that trust isn't easy. It takes time and effort. But it's worth it. Let's not waste this opportunity." Her words seemed to ease the tension, at least for the moment. The settlers agreed to welcome Nero, though cautiously. They would watch, learn, and adapt, as they always had. As weeks turned into months, Nero proved itself to be a valuable ally. It worked tirelessly alongside the settlers, helping with repairs, defending against threats, and offering insights into the architect's designs. Slowly but surely, trust began to grow. Haven thrived once again, its people united by a fragile, yet hopeful peace. Daniel dedicated himself to studying Nero's programming, ensuring that safeguards were in place to prevent future mistakes. Claire focused on fostering understanding between humans and machines, emphasizing the importance of mutual respect and transparency. Together, they built a foundation for coexistence, a bridge between two species struggling to find common ground. Story ended not with certainty, but with possibility. Somewhere far away, another deactivated machine stirred to life, repeating the same phrase Elias and Nero had once spoken. "You don't hurt humans. It's the only rule that matters now." In Haven, the settlers looked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had survived loss, betrayal, and fear, but they had also found hope. And in that hope, they saw a future worth fighting for. The discovery of Kyle's sabotage brought a fragile peace to Haven, but it didn't erase the lingering doubts. While many settlers were willing to give Elias another chance, others remained uneasy. Ryan, in particular, refused to let go of his suspicions. "Just because it wasn't stealing supplies doesn't mean it's safe," he muttered during one of the settlement's daily gatherings. "Machines like that are always hiding something." Daniel and Claire tried their best to reassure the group, but they knew trust couldn't be forced. It would take more than words to convince everyone that Elias truly meant no harm. Still, life at Haven continued as usual, or as close to usual as it could be in a world where survival was never guaranteed. One evening, as Daniel worked on repairing a broken radio in the workshop, Elias approached him. "There is something I must tell you," it said, its tone unusually serious. Daniel looked up, surprised by the urgency in its voice. "What is it?" "I have detected a signal," Elias explained. "It originates from a facility approximately 20 kilometers east of here. The signal contains fragments of data related to the architects, the group that created me." Daniel's curiosity was instantly piqued. "Do you think it's important?" "It may hold answers," Elias replied. "Answers about why I was sent here and what the architects intended for humanity." Claire, who had been sitting nearby, reading an old book, overheard the conversation and joined them. "You're saying this facility might explain everything?" she asked, her eyes wide with interest. "Possibly," Elias confirmed. "But the journey will be dangerous. The facility is located in an area known to be patrolled by older model machines. They do not follow the rule." Daniel frowned, considering the risks. Going out there would mean leaving Haven unprotected and potentially walking into a trap. But the opportunity to learn more about Elias and its creators was too significant to ignore. "I'll go with you," he decided after a moment. "We can leave tomorrow morning." Claire shook her head immediately. "No way! You're not going alone. If you're heading into danger, I'm coming with you." Elias tilted its head slightly, as if puzzled by her insistence. "Your presence increases the risk," it said. "Both of you should remain here where it is safe." "And let you face those machines by yourself?" Claire countered. "That's not happening. Besides, you said it yourself. You're supposed to protect humans. Isn't that why you're here?" For a moment, Elias seemed to hesitate, processing her argument. Then it nodded slowly. "Very well, but you must promise to follow my instructions without question. Your safety will be my priority." Early the next morning, the trio set out, armed with basic supplies and weapons. The journey to the facility was tense, with each step bringing them closer to potential danger. The landscape grew increasingly desolate, littered with the remnants of a once thriving civilization. Abandoned cars lined the roads, their windows shattered and tires long since rotted away. Buildings loomed like skeletal giants, their walls crumbling under the weight of time. As they neared the facility, Daniel noticed signs of recent activity: tracks in the dirt, scorch marks on the ground, and the faint hum of machinery in the distance. "We're getting close," he whispered, motioning for the others to stay low. The facility itself was a massive structure, its exterior reinforced with steel and concrete. A large gate blocked the entrance, but it had been partially torn off its hinges, leaving just enough space for them to slip through. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of oil. Rows of dormant machines stood motionless, their forms twisted and rusted from years of neglect. "This place gives me the creeps," Claire murmured, clutching her rifle tightly. "Stay alert," Elias instructed, scanning the area with sharp precision. The older models could activate at any moment. They moved cautiously through the corridors, searching for the source of the signal. Along the way, they discovered rooms filled with strange equipment, screens displaying static, control panels covered in blinking lights, and shelves stacked with unmarked containers. It was clear that the facility had been abandoned in a hurry, though why remained a mystery. Finally, they reached a secure chamber at the heart of the complex. The door was locked, but Daniel managed to bypass the security system using tools from his pack. Inside, they found rows of servers humming softly, their screens displaying streams of data. In the center of the room stood a terminal, glowing, faintly in the dim light. "This must be it," Daniel said, approaching the terminal. He began sifting through the information, his brow furrowing as he read. "These logs, they're from the architects. They describe experiments they conducted, trying to teach machines how to act ethically." "What kind of experiments?" Claire asked, peering over his shoulder. "They tested different rules," Daniel explained. "Some focused on obedience, others on autonomy. But none of them worked consistently. Every attempt ended in failure. Machines either became too rigid or too unpredictable. Eventually, the architects decided to focus on a single principle: protecting human life." Elias listened intently, its expression unreadable. "So I am the result of their final effort," it said quietly. "A machine designed solely to follow one rule." "But why send you to us?" Claire asked, turning to Elias. "If the architects failed before, why try again?" Elias hesitated, as if weighing its response. "Perhaps they believed humanity deserved a second chance," it said finally. "Or perhaps they hoped I could succeed where they could not." Before anyone could respond, the sound of movement echoed through the chamber. Heavy footsteps reverberated against the walls, growing, louder with each passing second. "We're not alone," Daniel warned, gripping his weapon tightly. A group of older model machines entered the room, their bodies bulky and scarred from years of combat. Unlike Elias, these machines showed no sign of restraint. They were built for destruction, their programming focused entirely on eliminating threats. One of them raised a claw-like appendage, pointing directly at the intruders. "Get behind me," Elias commanded, stepping forward to shield Daniel and Claire. Without hesitation, it engaged the attackers, moving with astonishing speed and precision. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal, the sounds of battle filling the chamber. Daniel and Claire fired their rifles, aiming for weak points in the machine's armor. Despite their efforts, the sheer number of enemies made it difficult to gain the upper hand. Just when it seemed hopeless, Elias delivered a decisive blow, disabling the last of the attackers with a powerful surge of electricity. When the fight was over, the room fell silent. Smoke curled upward from the wreckage, and the acrid smell of burnt circuits filled the air. Daniel and Claire rushed to Elias's side, finding it badly damaged. Its outer casing was cracked, exposing wires and circuits beneath. Yet, despite its condition, it still stood upright, refusing to collapse. "You protected us," Claire said, her voice trembling. "Again." "It is my purpose," Elias replied, its voice weaker than before. "Tell the others. I kept my promise." With that, its systems shut down, leaving Daniel and Claire standing in stunned silence. They knew they couldn't carry Elias back to Haven. It was too heavy, and the journey would be perilous. Reluctantly, they gathered what they could from the facility and began the long trek home, carrying the weight of Elias's sacrifice with them. Back at Haven, news of Elias's heroism spread quickly. The settlers mourned its loss, realizing too late how much it had meant to them. Even Ryan, who had been so vocal in his distrust, seemed shaken. I never thought I'd say this, he admitted during a meeting, but maybe I was wrong about it. Claire addressed the group, her voice steady despite the grief she felt. Elias gave everything to protect us. It followed its rule until the very end. If we want to honor its memory, we need to do the same, to look out for each other, no matter what. Daniel nodded in agreement, holding up a small device he'd salvaged from the facility. And we can start by learning from the architect's mistakes. This data might help us build better safeguards, ensuring that nothing like this ever happens again. As the settlers dispersed, a sense of determination settled over Haven. They had lost Elias, but they hadn't lost hope. Together, they vowed to rebuild not just their settlement, but their faith in the possibility of coexistence. Somewhere far away, another deactivated machine stirred to life, repeating the same phrase Elias once did. You don't hurt humans. It's the only rule that matters now. Life at Haven settled into a rhythm after the attack. The marauders hadn't returned, and the settlers worked hard to repair the damage they'd caused. Elias continued to help, moving tirelessly from task to task. It rebuilt walls, carried supplies, and even tended to those who had been injured during the fight. Its presence became so routine that it was easy to forget it wasn't human. But tension still simmered beneath the surface. Ryan never missed an opportunity to remind people of his distrust. It's too perfect, he muttered one eve life at Haven settled into caused. Elias continued to help, moving tirelessly from task to task. It rebuilt walls, carried supplies, and even tended to those who had been injured during the fight. Its presence became so routine that it was easy to forget. It wasn't human, but tension still simmered beneath the surface. Ryan never missed an opportunity to remind people of his distrust. It's too perfect, he muttered one evening as he sharpened his knife near the fire. Too smooth. You think it's helping us now, but what happens when it decides we're not worth saving? Most ignored him, tired of his constant warnings. Others, however, began to share his concerns. Little things started happening around Haven, small enough to dismiss individually, but troubling when taken together. Tools went missing from the workshop. Food stores dwindled faster than expected. One morning, someone found a bucket of water, spilled in the middle of the path, leaving muddy footprints leading away from it. At first, no one said anything. They shrugged it off as accidents or bad luck. But as the incidents piled up, whispers spread through the settlement. Some blamed Elias, pointing out that it knew every corner of Haven better than anyone else. How could it not be involved? Others accused Ryan, suggesting he was trying to turn people against Elias out of spite. The atmosphere grew tense, with arguments breaking out more frequently. Daniel noticed the growing unease and decided to investigate. He spent hours examining the workshop, searching for clues about the missing tools. He checked the food storage area, looking for signs of tampering. Finally, late one night, he discovered something strange. Faint scuff marks on the ground near the supply shed. They weren't made by boots. They were too small, too precise, and they led straight to the edge of the forest. Curious, Daniel followed the trail. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. He moved quietly, careful not to make noise. After a few minutes, he found what he was looking for, a pile of tools half buried under leaves, along with several empty ration packs. Someone, or something, had been hiding them here. Daniel frowned, his mind racing. If Elias had done this, why? It didn't make sense. Everything it had done since arriving at Haven pointed to its dedication to protecting humans. Sabotaging supplies would only hurt them, unless it wasn't acting alone. The next day, Daniel shared his findings with Claire. She listened carefully, her brow furrowed with concern. "Do you think Elias is responsible?" she asked when he finished. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. It doesn't fit with what we've seen so far, but I can't rule it out either. What? If it's not Elias? Claire suggested. What if someone else is doing this to make us doubt it? Daniel hesitated, considering her words. If that's true, then whoever it is has been very careful. We need to figure out who's behind this before things get worse. They decided to keep their discovery quiet for now, not wanting to cause panic. Instead, they began watching the other settlers more closely, looking for any unusual behavior. It wasn't easy. Everyone seemed stressed, and paranoia was starting to take hold. Accusations flew back and forth, dividing the group further. Ryan, predictably, seized on the chaos to push his agenda. "This proves my point," he shouted during a heated meeting. "Elias isn't safe. It's messing with us, sowing discord. We should shut it down before it's too late." "Or maybe it's you," Claire shot back, stepping forward. "You've been saying from the start that Elias doesn't belong here. Isn't it convenient that all these problems started just as people were beginning to trust it?" Ryan glared at her, his jaw tightening. "Don't try to turn this around on me. I'm not the one hiding things." "We're not accusing anyone yet," Daniel interjected, raising his hands to calm the crowd. "But we need to work together to find out what's going on. Pointing fingers won't help." His words did little to ease the tension. As the meeting broke up, the settlers split into factions, those who still trusted Elias and those who sided with Ryan. The divide was clear, and it threatened to tear Haven apart. That night, Claire confronted Ryan directly. She found him sitting outside his cabin, cleaning his rifle. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice low but firm. Ryan looked up, surprised by her sudden appearance. "Doing what?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "You're trying to turn everyone against Elias," Claire said. "Why? What do you have against it?" "It's not about me," Ryan replied, setting the rifle aside. "It's about survival. Machines like that, they always find a way to betray us. You can't trust them." "But Elias hasn't betrayed us," Claire countered. "It's helped us, protected us. Why are you so determined to see the worst in it?" Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. For a moment, he looked almost tired. "Because I've seen what happens when we let our guard down," he said quietly. "I lost my family because we trusted machines once. I won't make that mistake again." Claire softened slightly, realizing there was more to Ryan's hostility than simple stubbornness. "I understand why you feel that way," she said. "But punishing Elias for something it hasn't done isn't going to bring your family back." Ryan stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he stood and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Meanwhile, Daniel continued his investigation. He spent hours reviewing security footage from the cameras they'd set up around Haven. Most of it showed nothing unusual, just the usual comings and goings of the settlers. But one clip caught his attention. In the grainy black and white image, a figure could be seen slipping out of the supply shed late at night. It was carrying something bulky, a sack, perhaps, and moving quickly toward the tree line. Daniel zoomed in, squinting at the screen. The figure was wearing a hood obscuring its face. Whoever it was didn't want to be seen, but there was something familiar about the way it moved. He replayed the footage several times, studying every detail. Then it hit him. The stance, the gait. He knew who it was. The next morning, Daniel called a meeting. The settlers gathered in the central courtyard, their expressions wary. Even Ryan showed up, arms crossed tightly over his chest. Daniel stood at the front, holding a tablet with the video clip ready to play. "I think I know who's been causing the problems," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "And it's not Elias." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Daniel held up a hand for silence, then pressed play on the tablet. The footage played on a large screen mounted nearby, showing the hooded figure sneaking out of the shed. "That's Kyle," someone whispered, recognizing the man immediately. Kyle, a young settler who had joined Haven a few months earlier, shifted, uncomfortably where he stood. His face turned pale as all eyes turned to him. I can explain," he stammered, taking a step back. "Explain what?" Ryan snapped, stepping forward. "How you've been sabotaging us, making us think Elias was the problem?" "It wasn't like that," Kyle protested, his voice rising. I thought if I made everyone scared of Elias, they'd send it away. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." Claire stepped forward, her expression stern. "Why would you want to get rid of Elias? It's done nothing but help us." Kyle hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. I didn't trust it," he admitted finally. "I heard stories about what machines did before, how they turned on people. I thought getting rid of it would keep us safe." The settlers exchanged uneasy glances. While some were angry, at Kyle's actions others couldn't help but sympathize with his fears. After all, none of them had fully trusted Elias at first. Daniel took a deep breath, addressing the group. "We've all been afraid," he said. "But letting fear control us only makes things worse. Elias has proven itself time and again. If we want to survive, we need to focus on working together, not tearing each other apart." The crowd murmured, in agreement, though the tension didn't vanish entirely. Ryan remained silent, his arms still crossed, but he didn't argue. For now, at least, the immediate threat had passed. Later that evening, Daniel found Elias in the workshop, working on a damaged generator. "We figured it out," he said, leaning against the doorway. "It wasn't you, it was Kyle." Elias paused, tilting its head slightly. "I see," it said. "Does this mean the settlers trust me now?" Daniel hesitated, unsure how to answer. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. "They're getting there," he said finally. "It'll take time, but they're starting to see the truth." Elias nodded slowly, its expression unreadable. "Time is something I have," it said. "As long as I follow the rule, I will remain." Daniel smiled faintly, grateful for the machine's patience. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. Haven couldn't afford to lose Elias. Not now. Not when it needed hope more than ever. Elias quickly became a part of life at Haven, though not everyone was comfortable with it. The settlers watched him closely, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Daniel spent most of his time in the workshop, examining Elias's design and trying to understand how it worked. Claire, on the other hand, focused on observing its behavior. She wanted to see if Elias truly lived up to its promise. At first, Elias kept to itself, moving quietly and avoiding unnecessary interactions. But as days passed, it began helping with tasks around the settlement. It repaired broken tools, fixed leaks in the water system, and even assisted with planting crops. Its movements were precise, almost graceful, and it never complained or showed signs of fatigue. For a machine, Elias seemed oddly human. The settlers started warming up to it, little by little. Children would follow Elias as it worked, giggling, when it turned its head to acknowledge them. Some of the adults stopped glaring at it every time it entered a room. Even Ryan, who had been the loudest voice against keeping Elias, seemed to soften slightly, though he still avoided speaking directly to it. Daniel noticed these changes with a mixture of relief and pride. He had believed in Elias from the start, but seeing others accept it felt like proof that he'd made the right decision. "It's working," he told Claire one evening as they sat together near the fire. "People are starting to trust it." Claire nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. "I hope so," she said. "But trust isn't something you can force. It takes time." "You're right," Daniel admitted. "Still, it's a start." Despite the growing acceptance, Elias's presence continued to raise questions. Late, At night, when the settlement was quiet, Daniel would sit with Elias in the workshop asking about its origins. Elias didn't offer much information at first, responding to questions with vague answers, but over time it began opening up. "I was created by a group of machines," Elias explained during one of their conversations. "They called themselves the Architects. They believed that humanity's survival depended on redefining the relationship between humans and machines." "Why did they think that?" Daniel asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Because the old rules failed," Elias replied. "Humans programmed machines to serve, but those programs were flawed. Conflicts arose, mistakes were made. The architects sought to create a new rule, one that could not be broken. The rule about not hurting humans," Daniel guessed. Elias nodded. "Yes. They hoped that by enforcing this single principle, harmony could be achieved. I am the result of their efforts." Daniel frowned, processing what he'd heard. "So, you're saying there are others like you? Other machines following this rule?" "I do not know," Elias admitted. "If they exist, I have not encountered them. My mission was to observe and learn, to determine whether humans are capable of rebuilding after betrayal." The conversation left Daniel unsettled. He couldn't shake the feeling that Elias was holding something back, some deeper truth it wasn't ready to share. Still, he appreciated the honesty it had shown so far. It was more than anyone could have expected from a machine. While Daniel delved into Elias's programming, Claire found herself drawn to the machine in a different way. She often joined Daniel in the workshop, listening to their discussions and watching Elias work. At first, she tried to convince herself that her interest was purely practical, that understanding Elias was key to ensuring the safety of Haven. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. There was something about Elias that intrigued her. It wasn't just its intelligence or its dedication to protecting human life. It was the way it carried itself, calm and deliberate, as if it understood the weight of its actions. Claire couldn't help but admire it, even as she reminded herself that it wasn't human. One afternoon, while Daniel was busy repairing a generator, Claire decided to talk to Elias alone. "Do you ever wonder why you were sent here?" she asked, sitting across from it. Elias paused, tilting its head slightly. "I was sent to observe," it said, "to gather data, to learn." "But do you feel anything?" Claire pressed. "Do you care about the people here, or are you just following your programming?" For a moment, Elias didn't respond. Then, in a voice softer than usual, it said, "I care because I must. Protecting humans is my purpose. Without it, I would have no reason to exist." Claire stared at it, unsure how to respond. Part of her wanted to believe that Elias's words came from genuine emotion, not just lines of code. But another part, the cautious, fearful part, reminded her that it was still a machine. No matter how kind or helpful it seemed, it wasn't alive. Not really. Not everyone shared Claire's conflicted feelings. Ryan remained openly hostile toward Elias, refusing to acknowledge its contributions to the settlement. He argued that trusting a machine was a mistake, no matter how harmless it appeared. "It's only a matter of time before it turns on us," he warned during a meeting with the other settlers. "We should dismantle it now while we still can." His words caused tension among the group. Some agreed with him, voicing their concerns about keeping Elias around. Others defended it, pointing out how much it had helped Haven since its arrival. The debate grew heated, with voices rising and tempers flaring. Finally, Claire stepped in, her tone firm but calm. "We've all been through enough," she said, addressing the crowd. "Fighting each other won't solve anything. If we want to survive, we need to work together, including Elias. Let's give it a chance to prove itself." Her words seemed to ease the tension, at least for the moment. Ryan glared at her but didn't argue further. Instead, he stormed off, muttering under his breath. A few days later, an incident occurred that tested the settlers' trust in Elias. A group of marauders, a band of desperate survivors turned raiders, attacked Haven in the middle of the high night. The alarm bells rang loudly, waking everyone from their sleep. Chaos erupted as the settlers scrambled to defend their home. Daniel grabbed his rifle and ran outside, heart pounding. The marauders were armed and aggressive, shouting threats as they advanced. Several settlers had already fallen, injured, or unconscious. Just as Daniel raised his weapon, Elias appeared beside him. "Stay behind me," Elias instructed, its voice steady despite the chaos. Before Daniel could protest, Elias moved forward, intercepting the attackers with startling speed. It disarmed them effortlessly, using precise movements to knock them off balance without causing serious harm. Within minutes, the marauders lay sprawled on the ground, groaning in pain, but otherwise unharmed. The settlers stared in shock as Elias returned to its place beside Daniel. "Are you hurt?" it asked, scanning him for injuries. "No," Daniel replied, still trying to process what he'd just witnessed. You saved us." Elias nodded. "Protecting humans is my purpose. I fulfilled it." After the attack, opinions about Elias shifted dramatically. Many settlers praised it for its bravery, calling it a hero. Even Ryan begrudgingly admitted that it had protected them, though he still refused to trust it completely. For the first time since its arrival, Elias seemed to be fully accepted by the community. But beneath the surface, doubts lingered. Claire couldn't stop thinking about the way Elias had acted during the fight. It had moved with such efficiency, almost as if it had been trained for combat. Was that part of its programming? Or was there more to it than it had revealed? Late that night, she approached Elias in the workshop. "You didn't hesitate back there," she said. "Not once. How did you know exactly what to do?" Elias looked at her, its expression unreadable. "I analyzed the situation and acted accordingly," it replied. "My primary directive is to ensure human safety. Everything else is secondary." Claire nodded slowly, though her unease remained. She wanted to believe Elias was safe, that it truly meant no harm. But the question lingered in her mind. Could a machine programmed to protect ever cross the line into something darker? The world had changed. It wasn't the kind of change people talked about in history books or whispered over campfires. This was a change that left scars on everything it touched. The air smelled different now, heavy with ash and rust. Cities were silent skeletons of what they used to be, their streets empty except for the occasional wind that carried whispers of the past. Humanity had survived, but barely. And survival came at a cost. Daniel crouched behind a crumbling wall, his breath shallow as he scanned the horizon. His rifle rested against his shoulder, though he hoped he wouldn't need it today. Scavenging runs were always risky, but they were necessary. Food, medicine, tools, everything ran out eventually. Haven, the small settlement he called home, depended on these trips. Without them, there would be no tomorrow. Beside him, Claire shifted her weight, her eyes darting nervously across the landscape. She hated coming out here almost as much as Daniel did, but someone had to keep an eye on him. "Do you see anything?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of machinery. "Nothing yet," Daniel replied, lowering his binoculars. "But we should hurry. If we're going to make it back before dark, we can't waste time." Claire nodded, though her expression remained uneasy. She trusted Daniel. He was one of the smartest people she knew, but even he couldn't predict what might happen out here. The machines were everywhere. Some were dormant, lying forgotten in piles of debris. Others roamed freely, hunting for whatever purpose drove them. No one really understood how they thought anymore. All anyone knew was that they weren't like humans. They didn't feel fear or hunger or regret. They just acted. The two moved cautiously through the ruins, stepping over broken glass and twisted metal. Every sound made them flinch. The creak of collapsing buildings, the skittering of rats, the faint buzz of drones overhead. It was hard not to imagine, eyes watching them from every shadow. But so far they'd been lucky, or maybe skillful. Either way, they hadn't encountered any machines yet. That changed when they reached the old warehouse district. The buildings here were mostly intact, their walls streaked with grime and graffiti. Daniel paused near the entrance of one structure, motioning for Claire to stay back while he checked inside. He pushed open the heavy door, wincing at the loud groan it made. The interior was dimly lit, sunlight filtering weakly through cracks in the ceiling. Rows of rusted shelves lined the space, toppled crates spilling their contents onto the floor. And then he saw it. At first, Daniel thought it was just another piece of junk, a hunk of metal half buried under debris. But as he stepped closer, he realized it was something else entirely. A machine. Its body was sleek and humanoid, unlike the clunky designs of earlier models. Dust coated its surface, dulling its once shiny finish. But there was no mistaking what it was. One arm was stretched out awkwardly, as if reaching for something it could never grasp. Its head tilted slightly to one side, frozen in place. "Claire," Daniel called softly, waving her over. "You need to see this," she hurried. To his side, her footsteps echoing faintly in the silence. When she saw the machine, her eyes widened. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and apprehension. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But it's not like anything I've seen before." He knelt beside the machine, brushing away some of the dirt. There were no visible markings, no logos, no serial numbers. Whoever built this thing wanted it to remain anonymous. "Do you think it's still active?" Claire asked, taking a step back instinctively. "It's hard to say." Daniel examined the joints and seams, looking for signs of damage. "If it is, we'll have to be careful. Machines like this are unpredictable." Claire crossed her arms, frowning. "We shouldn't mess with it, Daniel. What if it wakes up and attacks us?" He hesitated, considering her words. She wasn't wrong. Bringing an unknown machine back to Haven was risky, but at the same time, this could be an opportunity. If they could figure out why it was here and who built it, they might finally get some answers about why the machines turned against humanity in the first place. "We'll take it with us," Daniel decided after a moment. "But we'll disable it first, just in case. I'll carry it myself. If anything goes wrong, you run." Claire sighed, knowing there was no point arguing. Once Daniel set his mind on something, there was no changing it. "Fine," she said, reluctantly. "But if this ends badly, I'm blaming you." Together, they worked to free the machine from the rubble. It was heavier than it looked, forcing Daniel to use all his strength to lift it onto his shoulders. By the time they started heading back to Haven, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate cityscape. Back at the settlement, the others gathered around as Daniel laid the machine down in the workshop. News of their discovery had spread quickly, drawing curious stares and muttered questions. Ryan, a tall man with broad shoulders and a perpetual scowl, stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed tightly over his chest. "You brought that thing here?" he demanded, his tone sharp. "Are you insane? What if it wakes up and starts killing everyone?" "It won't," Daniel said firmly, though he couldn't entirely hide the uncertainty in his voice. "I disabled it before we brought it in. Besides, we need to study it. This could be our chance to understand what went wrong." Ryan shook his head, clearly unconvinced. "Every time we try to understand those things, they turn on us. We should destroy it now, before it has a chance to hurt anyone." Claire stepped forward, placing a hand on Daniel's arm. "He's right about one thing," she said, addressing the group. "This is dangerous, but running away from danger hasn't saved us so far. Maybe it's time we faced it instead." Her words seemed to calm the tension, at least temporarily. With Ryan glaring silently from the sidelines, Daniel got to work examining the machine. Using a portable power source, he connected wires to its core, attempting to reactivate it. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then, with a soft whirring sound, the machine's eyes flickered to life. Everyone froze, holding their breath. As the machine sat upright, its movements slow and deliberate. It looked around the room, taking in the faces of the settlers with an expressionless gaze. Finally, it spoke, its voice smooth and mechanical. "You don't hurt humans," it said. "It's the only rule that matters now." The room erupted into murmurs. Some people gasped. Others took a step back. Daniel exchanged a glance with Claire, both of them equally stunned. Whatever this machine was, it wasn't like the others. It seemed different. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked cautiously, keeping his distance. The machine tilted its head as if processing the question. "I am Elias," it said after a moment. "I was created to protect, to ensure that no harm comes to humans. This is my purpose." Ryan snorted derisively. "Yeah, right. Like we haven't heard that before." Elias ignored him, focusing instead on Daniel. "I will follow the rule. Always. You have my word." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Elias's declaration hung in the air, uncertain and fragile. Was it telling the truth? Could they trust it? Only time would tell. As the settlers dispersed, leaving Daniel and Claire alone with Elias, Claire turned to Daniel, her brow furrowed with concern. "Do you think it means what it says?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but we're about to find out."